Yeah.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I am so excited to be here with my fabulous friend, Kinga Phillips. If you are not familiar with my page and myself, hi, I'm Cindy. I host my St. Croix, the travel blog, amongst a few other things that I do. But for this purpose tonight, I thought it would be important to sort of give you a bit of my background and why I feel I can have this conversation with a wonderful shark conservationist. I got my BS in animal science from UMass Amherst 100 years ago, and I minored in zoology and anthropology with a heavy focus on animal behavior. I also in the 90s worked at what was then called the Maritime Center in Norwalk. It's now called the Norwalk Aquarium, where I taught a variety of different courses, classes to public schools. I went out into the public schools, and I also taught right there at the aquarium as well. Different subjects on marine biology, marine animals, conservation, and sharks. We had this really cool shark tank. They still have it. We also had sea lions, which were or seals, sorry. We had seals, which were like my favorite, but we had this awesome tank of sharks where I started to understand sharks more and that they had personalities. We had names for all of them. We had sand tiger sharks and a leopard shark and a lemon shark and a whole bunch of different things. And we had a classroom at the very top of the aquarium. So if you came to the myths and misconceptions about sharks class, you came up the stairs and you were at the top of the shark tank. You could look down, and it was really funny because anytime people were up there, even if we had some storage up there, so even if somebody walked into the room, they would all come up with their noses above the water because they were looking for food, and they got pole fed once a week. So it was a pretty cool place. I learned a lot, and I got over a lot of my fears about sharks. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I grew up swimming on Cape Cod, going to the beaches there. My favorite birthday present one year, my parents got me a little rubber two-man rowboat that I could blow up and row out into Pocasset Harbor. I would not do that nowadays because of the great whites, but my grandmother had convinced me they'd never ever been there, so I had nothing to worry about. Anyway, so sharks have been part of my thought process and interest since I was a little girl, terrified of them, now fascinated by them, still very curious, and I still have a very healthy respect for them. But because of friends that I have that are amazing divers like Kinga, I now dive with sharks, and not quite in the same way she does. So I want to introduce you to Kinga Phillips. She is a writer. She is an award-winning journalist, TV host, a million things. She is actually a member of the Explorers Club, which is like Sir Edmund Hillary and the world's greatest explorers, and just really cool. And also in 2021, she became the first woman in 33 years, yay, girl power, to actually host her own show on Shark Week. And since then, she's hosted many. She is an amazing conservationist. She's very well respected in her field. And she is also a board member of the organization Shark Allies. So Kinga, thank you for joining me tonight. It's so great to see you. I miss you.
No, I'm so happy to be here. I only wish that I could be on island with you. That would be the only change I would make.
Oh, that would be awesome. And I'm sure you're going to be back soon
Yeah.
sometime. So Kinga, let's sort of just jump in. Since we're talking about sharks tonight, let's jump in and talk about the work that you do with the organization Shark Allies and why it's so important.
So Shark Allies is a fantastic organization started and headed by Stephanie Brendel, who is a force of nature in the shark and ocean conservation space. And I'm basically lucky to be a part of it. I do basically media for them. So I'm kind of the, hey, look at us, we're Shark Allies. I do TV stuff. I pop up here and there and I get to talk about sharks and deliver some good messaging where I can. But the real work and honestly the pounding the pavement is Stephanie Brendel. And she was instrumental in passing the first fin ban in the United States, which was in Hawaii. She helped push it through in Florida. She is now working with the EU. She's working on a project in Mexico. There are so many campaigns that we are a part of. One of the big ones that we always advocate for is products. There are so many products out there that use shark parts, like squalene, which can be derived from plants, but oftentimes is derived from shark livers because sharks do not have a swim bladder. They have a liver that's full of oil, and cosmetic companies are like, ooh, well, that's inexpensive and we can put it in things, which A, kind of sounds gross if we're being honest, and B, it really decimates the shark population. That is me. We're going to snooze that. So Shark Allies is a multifaceted organization that really works on shark conservation, ocean conservation, habitat protection, species protection, because sharks are an amazing keystone species. They are something that we need in our oceans. Sharks are not just kind of a byproduct of fish swimming around and take them or leave them. You can't take them or leave them. For us to have healthy oceans, healthy biomass in the oceans, we need to have sharks there.
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of important as we talk about them and we dive into some of the recent current events. There are over 450, over 500 species of sharks.
Yep,
so when
correct.
we talk about sharks, this is a broad range of animals from tiny to large. And the sharks that most of us are concerned with and are interested in it's a handful. The ones that interact more commonly in a negative way with humans, right?
That's true. And as I get this eyelash out of my eye, I will speak to that. So, even when you think about something like Shark Week, the main sharks that appear on Shark Week are the big, the bad, the bold, the really the wild sharks. They love the great whites. They love the tiger sharks. They love the bull sharks. Every now and then you'll have a cool scientific show and it'll be about the cookie cutter shark or Earth shark. But they just don't get as much media, and that's unfortunate. And like you said, there are hundreds of species of sharks, and quite honestly, there are some amazing ones out there. If you've ever seen a wobbegong shark or even a leopard shark, they are so cool, but they tend not to get cast in Shark Week shows because just off doing their own thing. And realistically, even the big sharks, the tigers and the bulls and the great whites, they're off just doing their own thing as well. The moments that we actually get to interact with them on camera or off camera are very rare. When we interact with them on camera, when people watch a Shark Week show, they think you just drop into the ocean and the sharks just show up and they're there. That's not the case. They do not want anything to do with us. Mostly when we work on those shows, we have permits for chumming, we have scientists, and we have to put a lot of scent in the water to even get them to show up. So the ocean isn't out there boiling over with sharks, and the moment you drop in, there's tons of them there. Are they there? Absolutely. You and I have seen them. We went diving in St. Croix, last April, and we were so lucky we got to see nurse sharks and we got to see Caribbean reefs, and that indicates there's a healthy reef. So it's always a positive thing when you get to see a shark.
Absolutely. Also in April when you were here, we had the off chance, like miracle of miracles of just happening to come across a situation. I have a friend who is a deep sea fisherman, Ryan, and with Lioness Sport Fishing. Shout out to Ryan. And we had the privilege to get on board with him and go out because he and his mate had found a sadly deceased humpback whale offshore from St. Croix. And when you were here visiting with me in April, we were really talking a lot about tiger sharks and the fact that we know they're out there, but we don't really see them. And we were trying to find an opportunity, since tiger sharks are kind of your jam, to figure out how to see them. And when this opportunity came up, this whale had been deceased for several days. We could smell that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it was about 2 miles off of the North Shore. We had the privilege of seeing, I don't know, maybe 30 to 40 tiger sharks feeding on it at that point.
Yeah, and a blue shark. And that, I have to say, that was still one of the most fated, extraordinary events. I had just come from filming a Shark Week show in the Bahamas, came to see you, and we had talked about sharks, and we were already speaking to scientists and really trying to get the data on shark species out there. We did so much diving, and then we had that opportunity to get out there. And what was extraordinary about that was, I think, twofold. One, to have that many sharks around the carcass of this whale, which, as far as we know, died naturally. When we posted those videos, there were a lot of comments about how did the whale die? Was it a boat strike? We don't know, but the whale had been dead for quite some time. And they do die naturally. They float to the surface, and then they become essentially a smorgasbord for shark species and other types of animals. And I remember when we put the cameras in the water, yeah, there were 20, 30 tiger sharks. There was a blue shark. It was pretty amazing. And what is truly, I think, exceptional about that experience is you've been living on St. Croix for such a long time. I've had the privilege of visiting several times and diving. You just don't get to really see those species of sharks. We know they're there. We've spoken with the scientists. We know the data's there. We know they're tagging them, but they're elusive. And because also of the topography of St. Croix and how deep the drop-offs are around you, those sharks really, they kind of don't want anything to do with us. Like they don't really have a whole lot of reason to come around.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of is going to segue into what we want to talk about with current events, but I do want to emphasize that it was such an extraordinary thing. I felt like I was in an episode of like National Geographic because things like that don't happen often,
Mhm.
especially close to shore. Just it was such fate that we ended up out there, and that we were able to see the species that we were really interested in seeing, which is very rarely seen on St. Croix. Maybe now a little more. And but this is going to segue into there are areas where we know certain sharks hang out. All sharks don't hang out everywhere. They have habitats and they have food sources and they have habits just like any other animal. You're not going to go looking for a pack of wolves at the beach in Florida. You're going to go out into the mountains, you know. What kind of led us into having this discussion is the unfortunate incident that happened on January 8th, where a woman, a part-time resident of St. Croix, Arlene Lillis, lost her life due to a shark attack or interaction. It still weighs heavy on our hearts. And when we started talking about it and I started getting some information out there, I did have one comment where someone, they weren't saying it was us, but they were talking about victim blaming. And I want to sort of lead off by saying that when we get into what we know, this is not victim blaming, but the more we know about what the person was doing at the time of the attack, the better we can make an informed guess and we can help people in the future to be safer in the ocean.
Definitely.
So in Arlene's case, it was about 4:30 in the afternoon. She was snorkeling off of Dorsch Beach, which is one of my absolute favorite beaches. I had taken my sister there in October on our one. She came down for 3 days, and that was our beach day. That's my favorite beach to go to. I swim out there often. It's on the west end, and it was about 4:30, and she was a ways out because she was. It's been said she was out by the buoys.
Mhm.
I haven't measured it, but I've swam out to the buoys at Rainbow Beach and it's a good swim. So, she was probably 50, 60, 70 yards offshore. She was snorkeling in the late afternoon and she was snorkeling by herself.
Yeah.
And those are activities that put you into the realm of a little more dangerous as far as increasing the possibility of something happen, which is still extreme. I probably, if I'd been out there the week before, I might have been doing the same thing. Now I'm going to think twice because I do believe that there are probably more sharks offshore there now, and we're going to talk a little bit about why that may be. I also want to note that neither Kinga or I are a part of any official investigation.
Yes,
We
that's
don't know exactly the details of the investigation. It's not really possible for us to tell you what kind of shark it was or why. We can give you some educated guesses. Um, and some things that we think might happen, but we did immediately, Kinga put me in touch with, and so we had a group conversation going with two very skilled PhD shark scientists, Dr. Greg Scommel and Dr. Grace Castleberry, who have been studying sharks off St. Croix since 2013, and Grace came on board, I think it was 2018. Dr. Scommel is considered one of the top shark scientists in the country, if not the world.
mhm.
He's the one who's doing the tagging and public information off Cape Cod, where I grew up swimming. So it was kind of interesting. And I didn't know until you put us in touch, Kinga, that he actually had such a connection to St. Croix. And he's been coming here since the early 70s. He has a condo here. So it was really great to be able to talk to him and talk to Grace about and learn some more of about the data they have on sharks off St. Croix,
Absolutely.
and to sort of help figure out and decode maybe what might have happened.
Yeah, I think, to start with, to your point about victim blaming, I don't think there's a way to victim blame in this. First and foremost, this is such just it's like getting struck by lightning. The reality is there are things, and I'll go through that we can do to stay safe in the ocean. But honestly, if I were to give our audience tips on wearing a seatbelt in a car or how not to drown in the ocean, I would be doing them a much bigger solid than teaching them how to be safe with sharks. But my expertise is sharks, so I will speak to that. Now, first and foremost, I don't think there was really anything that Arlene was doing wrong. I have done everything that she's doing a million times over. You're on an island that really has had minimal shark incidents, and we can go over that. What has transpired around the island, it's truly minimal. You would have no reason to really think otherwise. There are certain things like, do you want to snorkel with somebody? Yes, that's just a safety in general. What if you swallow some water? What if you get a cramp? What if you have a medical emergency? You're more likely to need somebody there with you if you have a medical emergency in the water. So snorkeling, we free dive a lot. We never free dive alone. You never scuba alone. Having someone with you in the water, I think, is just really, really smart. 4:30 p.m., we always say, you hear, don't go at dusk and dawn or at night. Those are shark feeding times. Sharks are what we call crepuscular. They like to feed in the mornings. They like to feed at dusk. They like to feed at night. Those are not great times to be in the water. I don't think 4:30 p.m. was pushing dusk there. You can tell me, because was that dusk, or was that still
No, dusk was probably closer to 6. It was
okay?
later in the day, so the
Okay.
sun would have been sitting a little bit
Okay.
lower. And so there would have potentially been a little more of that silhouetting happening. And we call them crepuscular. It's funny. I had somebody comment a lot, well, why do we say dusk and dawn? Why are they looking at their watches? Well, there are so many animals across the animal kingdom that are more active at that time of day, and they tend to be prey animals. So deer and other prey animals are more active at dusk because they're coming out in, it was light out when they'd be easily seen, and then it's going to be dark when predators are going to be hunting. So at those sort of lower light times, that's
Yep.
when the prey animals tend to get a little more brave and come out to eat and move around a little bit more. But some of the smart predator animals that are very opportunistic will stay on the outskirts. And so at that time of day, a shark potentially can be sort of hiding in the shadows down below. And if you're on the surface, it's going to be harder to see them down there. And they do that because they're looking for fish. They're not looking for humans.
They're
But
definitely
it's
not
just
looking
more
for you.
opportunistic to hunt at those times because that's when their prey is going to be more active. And that's when schools of fish tend to be coming in closer to shore. So they're going to follow that. They're going to stay in the shadows.
Yeah. And obviously what you're speaking about as well is prey movements. And that is something that we can discuss with the location of where this beach was and what we know is around there. We know that tiger sharks love to feed on turtles. And that's something else that I speak to people extensively. I live in California. We have great whites here. We know that they are absolutely everywhere. I have a friend that flies his drone. He sees them all the time. The fact is, and I think this is really the message, if sharks wanted to eat us, none of us would be here. None of us who have gone in the ocean would be here. I certainly would not be here. You would not be here. Most of my surfer friends would not be here. My freediver friends would not be here because we know that they are abundantly present even if we don't see them. And people think that there's an increase of sharks in the ocean now. This is causing problems. That's actually untrue. We have significantly decimated our shark populations. They are starting to come back in certain areas because we have protections, we have CITES, we have definitely helped to kind of bolster some, like on Cape Cod, we have great whites coming back. We've also been protecting the pinniped population, so that's their food source that's coming back. All of that is incredibly important. But the reality is that these incidents are so unbelievably isolated. They really are. And even when you do take things into consideration, you don't want to snorkel alone. You don't want to go out at dusk and dawn. One thing is awareness of your environment. We were doing a Shark Week show called Caught last year, and they would show me videos of shark incidents, and then I would kind of describe what happened there. And I would sort of CSI or kind of go work backwards to figure out why there was an incident. There was one in South Africa, and a guy got hit by a great white. He was okay, but he got hit by a great white while he was surfing. And when I started looking at the dates of when it happened, the location that when it happened, I watched an interview with him and he was like, "Oh, there was a smell of sardines in the air." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." I looked, it was right during the sardine run. So those predators are arriving to that area because there's a food source. So here in California, if you have a sea lion colony, not a great place to get in the water. And we have unfortunately had some incidents where swimmers, people who do the open ocean swims have been hit by sharks. And oftentimes what comes out after is that there was a seal colony right there and the seals were swimming around them. So those are just a couple of things to really look out for. But again, what I'm going to keep reiterating here is that globally, there are maybe 6 to 10 fatalities from sharks in the world. There's truly anything, including your own toilet, that will kill you faster than a shark. And but I deeply and profoundly understand, first and foremost, Arlene's story is a tragedy any way you slice it. Whether she died in a car accident, whether it was a bee sting, whatever it was, it's an absolute tragedy to lose a loved one and to lose like a respected member of the community. That it hurts my heart. And to go in such a way, it is absolutely terrible. And I will never say to anyone, "Oh, sharks aren't scary." They are. They are very large predators that live in the ocean and they have sharp teeth. So when we have interactions with them, they are oftentimes unfortunate. And I don't fault people for actually having a fear of sharks because it's unbelievably primal. If you put me in the woods at night and
Absolutely.
I knew there were grizzlies, I'm going to be scared. I've been on the African savannah and the whole time I'm like, "Where are the lions? Where are the lions?" We are prey. So we cannot contend with claws and teeth that these animals have. So we need to take precautions when we are in any of these environments. But again, those incidents are so unbelievably rare.
Yeah. I mean, the last fatal shark attack that's listed with the shark attack file was in the early 1970s. And that's one that we plan on talking a bit about in
Yeah.
hopefully the near future. Um, it is listed as a fatal shark attack. There are many who question some of the validity of it and what really happened. And prior to that, I don't even know when there was. I know there was one at Megan's Bay. I think it was in the 60s. It might have been in the 80s, somewhere in there. And it happened to be a Galapagos shark of all
Interesting.
things, which is maybe was migrating. It was rare. And I don't really know all the facts around that. But yeah, it is such a rarity for a fatal shark attack to happen. Even an unprovoked shark bite in our waters is really unusual. And I personally, with my background and things that I know, I've always said to people that I believe we have such a low incidence here in the Caribbean because our water is so clear where we tend to be swimming. And we don't have a lot of those larger marine mammals or prey animals in our water. We don't have seals and sea lions. We don't have manatees around the Virgin Islands. There is a West Indian manatee, but they have been hunted almost to extinction, and they're really just found near Puerto Rico. So we don't, there's nothing in the water so much that tends to look like us because, I mean, I don't know the actual statistic, but I'm going to guesstimate that 90% even of fatal shark attacks are cases of mistaken identity. You know, it's very rare that a person is fully consumed. It is
It is. It is.
typically a bite that is often catastrophic and causes an enormous amount of blood loss, and that is why it's fatal. But they don't come back for more because that's not what was on their menu to begin with. They just made a mistake, a really bad, awful, scary mistake, but it was a mistake.
Yeah, I mean you're absolutely right. In most cases you have a hit. Even in this case, she was hit, and then by the time the rescuers got to her, they never even saw a shark. So
Yeah,
that shark left. And unfortunately, sharks don't have hands. They can't go, "Oh, what's this?" And they're very curious. They're very investigative because that's what they have to do in order to eat. Sharks are designed essentially to breed, to eat, to swim. Like this is what they do. So they are very curious. We have tons of footage of bruvs baited underwater, remote video cameras, where sharks will come up and they'll investigate objects because they're super curious. They don't have hands, they have teeth. So that's what they investigate with. So that's what happens in the majority of incidents, is that you have a shark who comes over to a human. There's an incident that takes place, and the shark goes, "Oh no, not interested in this," and it leaves. But to your point, we're talking about very large predators in some cases with very sharp teeth. So if you were going to get in a quick tangle with some ginsu knives, that's not going to end well, even if it's very brief. So
right.
it's going to be an unfortunate incident, even if people walk away with just a couple of stitches. That's kind of the best case scenario. But yes, it is unbelievably rare, and most shark incidents are not fatal.
Yeah. Yeah. And, when we dive here off St. Croix, which is a little tamer shark diving than you do for Shark Week. But, we've seen it. We've been out there. In fact, the first time I dove with sharks here on St. Croix was with you when we filmed Reel.
Remember.
Uh, and I was terrified to get in the water because I knew we were going to see some sharks. And Ramona and I held on to each other. Now she's diving with tiger sharks.
Mhm.
Um, but there was somebody in the water who was spearing a lionfish. That's why we knew we would see them.
Mhm.
And sure enough, they showed up. And there have been a lot of people talking about, well, is it because the divers are spearing lionfish that they're coming in? Are they baiting them in? And I would say, from what we've seen, first of all, an educated guess is going to be that the species of shark that attacked Arlene was not a Caribbean reef shark or a black tip reef shark. The estimate is that, based on the bite analysis and things, is that it was a very large shark, like 10 feet plus. And Caribbean reefs don't really get that big. It would have to have been an enormous one for it to be that. They also tend not to be on that area of the west side. We'll talk about that in a minute. But when we're in the water with them and there's a lionfish, they're very, like you said, they're very inquisitive. They're very cautious. If we turn towards them and look at them, typically, if they're swimming by us, they turn around. I always say they turn around like, oh, I'm not following you. I'm not following you.
Yeah.
Like, they're very shy. I've seen them get a little spicy, but it's usually with each other in competition over who's going to get that fish. I personally am usually safely back from the fish. I did get certified to hunt lionfish by Patty, but I'm not interested because they have become more acclimated to eating the lionfish. And there was some reasoning behind that. The hope was that if they got a taste for lionfish, which are highly invasive, they don't belong here, they don't have natural predators, they're decimating our reefs. The hope was that if we taught them to eat them, that they would then hunt them on their own. Are they? We have no idea. But they
I
have
remember we
gotten
actually dove into
acclimated.
that.
What was
We
that?
We actually dove into that. Remember, literally and figuratively, we talked about that when I was out there in 2015 and we were filming Reel. Is
Yep.
we talked about the lionfish hunting and how it's going to affect the shark populations. And does it make sharks braver to approach humans? The answer is yeah. Sharks are super smart. I even distinctly remember when we were there, and for the segment, we shot some lionfish that I had my spear attached to my BCD, and the moment I unclipped it, the sharks started tracking me because they know they're extremely intelligent. So in such a case, if I were hunting and we see these videos all the time, people spearfishing, we spearfish out here, if someone has an incident with a shark and they're spearfishing, it's usually a provoked attack because you are creating an environment where you are attracting sharks. So even with the lionfish, which, it's iffy whether that is a good idea to train sharks because they are smart enough to understand that these people are shooting the sharks, they're giving us the fish, they're feeding us the fish. This is why yeah, I think ecotourism and shark tourism is fantastic. I've never been a huge fan of hand feeding sharks because I do think that they go, oh, okay, cool, hands, they feed me snacks. So there's an intelligence level that I think we need to think about with sharks. But at the same time, eliminating lionfish is also a huge plus for the reefs. And there's a way to do that, I think, where, when we're hunting lionfish in sharky areas, we make sure that the sharks aren't around us because they will take your spear. They're very hyped up when it comes to the fish.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of the divers here now have started, instead of feeding them off their spear, which in the beginning was kind of fun, they usually will push it off their spear,
Yeah.
so that they're not associating the tip of the spear with the feed. And also it definitely has acclimated them to humans, because I've been diving off St. Croix since 2001, when Hal at Candy Dive Shop talked me into it. After I was like terrified, no, I can't be a marine biologist because I can't dive. We never saw sharks out there. To see a shark, a reef shark, a Caribbean reef shark, any shark from like 2001 to just before 2015 was really rare. It was like a huge big deal. Now, off North Shore and Salt River, I mean, we pretty much can be guaranteed every dive you're going to see one or two. And
Yeah.
they usually stay on the periphery. They kind of follow. Sometimes they come through, but I've personally never seen them be aggressive. They're kind of like, I don't want to say puppy dogs. I'll say they're kind of like friendly coyotes.
Friendly coyotes. I actually prefer that to them being puppy dogs because I always tell people, I'm like, sharks are not man eaters, but they're also not a teddy bear. Like they are big predators, just like a bear or a lion or a mountain lion. I hike in the hills here all the time, and I know that there are mountain lions here. I carry pepper spray for that. I carry bear spray. So it's part of the magic of living on a planet where we have these glorious animals and these big predators is knowing that we have an opportunity to interact with them. And hopefully, when we do have their interactions, they are on our terms and we get to spend time with them in a positive way. But there are times when incidents like this happened. And I think it's great that we're having this conversation. And I think it's great to address that. I think it's great to remind people that this isn't something that Arlene did wrong. This isn't something that, wow, she really could have prevented this. She could have not gone in the water. That's really it. I mean, if she had had somebody else with her, would something else have happened? Could this have still happened? Potentially, yes. Again, swimming with somebody else is a good idea. But, I think what's interesting always to me as someone who works with sharks is understanding where this happened, how it happened, what the prey situation in the area is, the time of day. It's, when we spoke with Dr. Scommel, he was asking those same questions too, because we as shark people want to understand, was there a pattern here? And sometimes there isn't. Sometimes it's a one-off, but usually you truly can break it down and say this was kind of the inception point here. Was the shark coming around because there are sea turtles in that area? Was the shark coming around because there is some kind of other activity that's been attracting sharks? There are little things. You become an investigator when you start to look at these cases.
Absolutely. We've kind of been, like I said, like it's so fun to have you to bounce things off of, because we both have that sort of like science detective, sort of persona. And I think that's a great way to sort of talk about what kind of prey is in that vicinity of where she was attacked, and what kind of has been changing over the past decade, that may have something to do with it.
Yeah.
And I sent over the numbers of sea turtles that have been nesting at Sandy Point and the species. And, understanding sea turtles of St. Croix, I've been involved, on the periphery with some of the conservation projects, but followed them very closely over the years. One of the things that has been happening at Sandy Point Wildlife Refuge, it's a wonderful place. It's protected. It's considered critical nesting habitat for the leatherback sea turtle. The leatherback sea turtle is an endangered, highly endangered species. They face a lot of threats in the ocean. I like to describe them as the superhero turtle. They're like, they dive the deepest. They dive the longest. They have the most unique body. They're called a leatherback because they don't have a hard carapace, a hard shell. It's actually leathery, and it's because they can dive to like 1,500 feet. And at that point, the pressure just squishes them like an accordion. They love to feed on jellyfish, probably giant squid. One of the things that I find absolutely fascinating about them is scientists have studied them and believe they can actually thermoregulate, which is something that we do. We have a temperature, we have a metabolism. Great white sharks have been found to thermoregulate. Also, that's why they can go into these cold waters and not get cold stunned like a sea turtle would. So Sandy Point has been critical nesting habitat, such an important conservation program that's been going on there for decades. It's closed completely to the public most of the year, but it's open only on the weekends from September, the first weekend in September until the last weekend in March. We got to go when you were here. You were here for that last weekend, and you saw it's absolutely pristine and gorgeous. And it's only open from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. I have always said, and I think we discussed this when you were here, I've always said I don't believe that we've had a lot of shark interactions off of St. Croix because that beach is closed during most of the year, and it's only open on weekends from 10 to 4, which is a safer time to be in the water. People tend not to swim out far there. The fact of the matter is that sea turtles are the favorite food of tiger sharks. And during the height of season, there are tiger sharks offshore. There always have been. That's not new. We hear local fishermen having caught them out by the pier or off in that area because they're coming in for their food source. What I find really interesting, and what makes me curious about a shift in their behavior that may have a bit more of an impact on our human population that we need to be aware of, not necessarily afraid of, but make smart decisions about, is that we've seen a steady decline in leatherback sea turtle nests from 2021 and even before. We used to see over 100 leatherback nests a year. This year it was 15, and it has been steadily declining year after year after year. Now, if you're a tiger shark and your favorite food is a sea turtle and it's all leatherbacks, you're probably going to come towards the shore at night when they're coming in to nest and try and get a nibble, or when they're coming in or out, and then you're going to probably follow them back out to the deep water because that's where they're going. And it's when they're coming in from the deep water and going back that they're more vulnerable. We've also, alongside of that huge decline in leatherback numbers. And that could be from a variety of things. They are open ocean, they're pelagic fish. They go out in the open ocean, and one of the number one threats to leatherback sea turtles, because they migrate so far across the oceans, is longline fishing. And in the U.S., you're not allowed to use J hooks, which can get the leatherback sea turtles. You're supposed to use circle hooks, but they're in international waters. Things like that don't always happen. What we are seeing now, though, is an explosion of sorts, or a dramatic increase in the number of green sea turtles. And in 2021, there were 1,399 green sea turtle nestings. That's a lot, but it has been increasing. And this year, at 2025, there were 2,600.
Wow.
My mind says to me, all right, a leatherback sea turtle's habits are far different from a green sea turtle, a green sea turtle and leatherback. Leatherback's going to go back out to the deep water. Green sea turtles feed off of the seagrasses. So they stay closer to shore in about 30, 40 feet of water during the day. They're on the bottom, they're milling around, they're like the cows of the sea eating the grass. So is that keeping that tiger shark population, is that pulling them a little closer into shore? And is that potentially keeping them around longer, because the green sea turtle nesting season tends to be later in the year slightly than the leatherback. And so I wonder if there was some crossover and it just happened to be one of those, mistaken identity situations because of them being brought in closer to shore.
I think you're a very good investigator, and I think the data that you're suggesting is actually very interesting. There's an island off of Australia called Rain Island, and the green sea turtle population has greatly declined, but for a long time, this was a great research opportunity for tiger sharks, because when the green turtles would come in, the tiger sharks would follow in mass. And one thing that we have learned about tiger sharks is they're really quite lazy. And they prefer to take turtles that are deceased, turtles that are struggling. It's one of the reasons that sharks are so important, is they eliminate the sick and the dying, right? It's like wolves when it comes to bison or deer. But sharks keep reef populations really healthy. They also, because seagrass is so valuable to us because it sequesters carbon, they actually kind of act like little herding dogs, and they move sea turtles around so that they don't completely annihilate patches of seagrass. So seaglass, I love seaglass, but seagrass. So tiger sharks are incredibly important when it comes to turtle populations and monitoring them. What you are telling me with the decline in leatherbacks and the massive increase in green sea turtles is 100% something that we look at when we look at changing prey populations, changing predator dynamics, changing migratory patterns. And there's such a variety of things that are happening in the world today. We have global warming. We know that the oceans are they're getting warmer, right? We know that currents are shifting constantly. So as prey moves around, predators are going to follow. It's the same thing. I always tell people, like, think of the ocean as the savanna. If you have a massive deer population, well, what's going to show up? You're going to have lions, you're going to have mountain lions, you're going to have wolves, you're going to have bears. Predators are going to go where the food source is. They're not going to go where the food source is not. So this is a whodunit. So it's complete logic. There's, as you know, that there's a population that our friend Shane and I are studying in Florida right now. And there are tiger sharks showing up en masse to the Florida panhandle. And we're like, what is causing this? They've been showing up there for the last couple of years. It is almost certainly prey numbers and how they are migrating differently because of changing ocean temperatures. So I think that what you have touched on here with the green sea turtle increase, I love the cat behind you climbing your shelves there.
That's Oliver.
That's Oliver. He wants to be in on the chat too. But I think that what you are addressing here, and every point that you've made, is absolutely accurate. Green sea turtles do stay more shallow. And when they are in the shallows and they're there in these large numbers, that is going to attract tiger sharks en masse. They are going to stay more shallow. So what you are suggesting is that people have more of an awareness that we have these changing dynamics in the ocean. And so now we have to kind of realign a little bit and be a little bit more aware that there haven't been that many tiger sharks in the shallows around that area that anyone has really witnessed or encountered or have even been tagged. I know our scientists have said they haven't had an opportunity to tag that much off of Sandy Point, but we know from fishermen, we know from people, we know from visual accounts, we know that the sharks are there. So now when the turtles are increasing, it's obvious. This isn't even, this isn't even rocket science. Like increasing prey numbers, increasing predator numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, and Dr. Grace Castleberry did also mention that she has seen from her satellite tagging data, she has seen movement in that 30 to 40 foot depth range of some of the tagged tiger sharks off St. Croix. So, and I've talked to a lot of divers and postulated with them that one of the things that I've noticed diving, and one of my favorite dive sites, we didn't get to dive it when you were here, unfortunately. We did dive, I think, Tide Box, which is off of Sandy Point a bit, but my favorite is at about 90 feet, and that's King's Corner. It's just a fabulous dive. But I've never seen a tiger shark when I've been diving out there. But what I also never see, typically south of the pier, are Caribbean reef sharks. And I speculate that that is because it is tiger shark territory. And not only do tiger sharks feed on sea turtles, but they're happy to feed on smaller sharks as well. And sharks, like you said, they're very smart. They're not dumb. And it seems like in some ways the pier, which goes out so far into the water to a depth of about 90 feet, it seems like that has provided sort of like a border. Because I know divers have seen, very rarely, but they have seen tiger sharks at the pier. Dr. Castleberry said they have, pinged there. I know at night, on night dives, people have seen reef sharks. When I was diving with Shane and his family in July, I saw a nurse shark swimming through the water along the pier. So that seems to be sort of like the boundary. They don't go south, and the tiger sharks don't tend to go north of the pier. I haven't heard a lot of that, but I haven't ever heard anybody out there seeing them. But so I think it's important, like you said, to know the environment, know what sort of species of sharks tend to be out there, to get a better idea of how you should behave in the water. And I think that is very important, is having situational awareness about you. I know that you talk about that when you are diving with tiger sharks, that you have your head on a pivot the whole time for that situational awareness. And even just diving off North Shore when I know that there's, those happy, friendly little coyotes around, I'm usually turning around like, where are they? Okay, they're there. I'm here. We're good.
And there are nuances to being in the water with sharks. If you're diving with sharks, it's a completely different environment than if you are swimming on the surface of the water. Very often, sharks will look at what's on the surface of the water as something to investigate, because what floats on the surface? Dead things, right? Like the whale. So when they see something on the surface of the water, you are actually less safe on the surface than you are in the water column. Also, if you are diving, you've got a mask on, you have visual awareness of the space around you. I always tell people, if you do see sharks around you, keep your eye on them, because they're predators. Like you said, they'll sneak up on you, and then when you look at them, they go, "Oh, no, I wasn't hanging out. I was just going over there." But that's because they do like to sneak up, because they're curious, because that is their nature, because they are predators. So when you do see a shark in the water, keeping your eye on them and making sure that they know that you see them is something that we always do. We don't like for them to sneak up behind us, especially if we're diving in the water with tiger sharks. We're not going to let them sneak up behind us. So usually there's a group of us in the water and we're all watching each other's backs. We're making sure that we're safe. Now, when you're on the surface of the water, whether you are surfing, whether you are boogie boarding, whether you are snorkeling, when you're snorkeling, you at least have a mask on. So there's a slight benefit to that. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend. And people always go, "Oh, well, what should I do if I encounter a tiger shark?" And or people have these videos online, and it always just rubs me when people are like, "This is how you redirect a tiger shark." And I'm like, first of all, no one's ever going to be in that position. 99.9% of the time, 99999. None of us are going to be in that position. Second of all, I would really slow clap the person who watched an Instagram video of how to redirect a tiger shark, who in a moment when they're snorkeling, a tiger shark arrives, goes, oh, let me do this. Just gonna just down and away. I'm gonna push it down and away. That's a really tough thing to do. And most of the time, honestly, you're probably not going to see it coming unless you're looking for it, because that is what they do. Just like your cat, just like any kind of a predator in the wilderness, just like a mountain lion. We have people that get attacked by mountain lions in our mountains here in California. It happens. And most of the time they don't see it coming because you're being stalked, right? But a mountain lion is probably actually looking at you as prey. Whereas a shark is like, what's that thing floating on the surface? Let me go check that out. But guess what? They're silent. There's actually not a dunna dunna that resonates in the water when there's a shark around. They're very quiet. So having awareness, if you are snorkeling, keep looking around. Make sure that your surroundings are what you hope they are, which is just crystal clear water with beautiful fish, right? You already mentioned that the water around St. Croix is very clear. It is beautiful. I love diving there. That is a huge benefit because murky water is also not something that you want to get into. You don't have a lot of rivers flowing out into the water. That's probably why you don't have a ton of bull sharks there, because they love a good river mouth. That's their jam. But you do have a lot of green sea turtles, and that is going to bring in tiger sharks. And as we witnessed, as we know from our scientist friends, we know that they're there.
Yeah, I have had a lot of people comment about bull sharks, and I've heard anecdotally people talking about them being off the South Shore. We do have some more murky water off the South Shore, and there aren't a lot of swimming beaches that people tend to frequent out there. But I think it's interesting to note that Dr. Scomo and Dr. Castleberry have never tagged one in the time that they've been studying sharks. And my dive friends, none of them have ever seen one. So if they are here, which is entirely possible because I trust fishermen when they say that they're here, fishermen are great resources of information. I think they tend to stay on the South Shore. So I think it's unlikely that it was a bull shark, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be. And hopefully we will be able to find out what species it was. Again, we are not part of the investigative team, so we don't know exactly what was done. But in other areas, St. Martin, you have a friend that you've worked with there, a scientist, they have done swabs of bite wounds and with DNA swabs, and they have been able to identify the species of shark in that manner. So it may be possible. Also, the Florida Shark Bite Institute, or Shark Attack Institute, I'm sure I got that wrong. Anyways, they do bite analysis from photographs. They have measurements, forensic analysis in that way. So they may be able to make some very educated guesses on what they think. But I think by and large, the number one suspect, the prime suspect, is probably a tiger shark. What I think it's important to note that it was not, because there was so much online right after it happened. People were terrified, which is so normal. Like you said before, it's a primal fear. It's so normal to be frightened, to be concerned. We do see hammerhead sharks in the shallows in certain areas. There are some that tend to habituate. They tend to be territorial, so you will only see one. That's their territory. But there has never in the history of recorded history ever been a fatal shark attack by a hammerhead shark.
If, again, we are not part of the investigation. We have spoken with some of the folks who are. My hope is that a DNA swab was done. I think that's really valuable data because that then lends itself to really helping to explain the species, why it was there. Then you can kind of like backtrack into the prey dynamics, the sea turtles. We can all speculate on what it is. I think most of us in the shark community are kind of leaning towards tiger. But again, to say that without knowing, you can't.
Right.
But so many of the key factors of what kind of a shark would have been in that area at that depth with the prey population that's around, it does lean in that direction. But hopefully that is information that we will have, and that is information that the scientists and the local authorities will be able to use to really kind of determine what created that entire dynamic. And maybe during this time of year, maybe the answer is to put up some warning signs during this time of year. Maybe if the green sea turtle populations are increasing and their habits are pushing into a season where people feel like, oh, it's safe to go in the water because this isn't turtle season, but that's changing. That information is wonderful, is a wonderful thing. Having some signs up on the beach saying, hey, listen, we have turtles nesting here. This brings in sharks. Be cautious when you go into the water. That might prevent some people from going in the water, and then some people might just have a little bit more awareness when they go into the water. So education is great, and if that data does become available and they choose to utilize that in such a way where the educational element is out there for people to take advantage of, I think that's going to be great. But I really do not think that people need to have a fear of going in the water in general or of sharks. Your chance of drowning or getting a cramp is significantly higher. So using caution around the ocean, around any body of water is super, super smart to do anyway. But your chance of encountering a shark is really small.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like a drop in the bucket. And in the article that I posted, I listed, some of the things that we often hear. You have a better chance of getting hit by and killed by a coconut falling out of a tree. That is actually true. Better chance than getting hit by lightning. And I posted that you have a better chance of getting in a bicycle accident and getting killed than getting hit by a shark.
100.
There's so many things, that are just, and I think
Dogs.
it's in
We love dogs.
dogs. Yeah.
Dogs kill far more people than sharks could ever dream of, and we love dogs. At the end of the
Yep.
day, animals are animals. So whether they are domesticated animals, whether they are wild animals, there are going to be incidents that happen sometimes. They're always tragic. There's no denying that. But with sharks in particular, they are unbelievably rare.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that we have a growing sea turtle population and we're seeing maybe some more tiger sharks, that's actually indicative of a healthier
Yeah.
ecosystem. So we don't want to indiscriminately, there was this call, go catch them, go kill them all, go kill all the sharks. There were tons of photos that were going up about people killing nurse sharks. It was definitely not a nurse shark. 1000% I can guarantee you it was not a nurse shark.
Well,
You
it
know,
makes
it's just not even physically possible. It was an infinitesimal chance that it would have been a hammerhead shark. That's, we did also get a few people talking about and posting about, we saw that there was, we confirmed it with Dr. Scommel and Dr. Castleberry that there was a sighting in November of an oceanic white-tipped shark
yeah.
not far offshore from Cowboy Beach, which is where our friend Jen with Cruising Cowgirls takes
Yeah.
us swimming on her horses. That was bizarre and just really weird because they are another pelagic species, which means that they tend to be way out in the ocean. But we have a sharp, steep drop off. We're near the Puerto Rican Trench, which is one of the deepest trenches in the world. And our drop off between St. Croix and St. Thomas is extremely deep. So, we talked a little bit with them about, is it possible that all these military ships that are coming in, could one have followed them in? People were talking about sonar being a factor. I personally think that would be less of a factor because we had the Navy here when I first moved here. They were, off Vieques for years. We weren't seeing that kind of shark activity. I wonder, the boats that are getting blown up in the ocean with people parts, could that be causing some frenzies happening? I don't know. It's so very far away from us, so I don't think so.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. Again, all of this is a little bit of CSI investigation, right? So the video that you shared with me was absolutely an Atlantic white tip that was spotted off of the beach. It was quite close to shore. That is unusual. They are a pelagic species. However, I have seen them close to shore in French Polynesia, in Hawaii. There are places in the Bahamas where they pop up close to shore. They are a very opportunistic species. Whether the Navy ships proximity to St. Croix could have an impact. So what was very interesting is you guys had, I believe it's the Iwo Jima that was off of, is that the name of the ship, the Iwo Jima, that's been off the coast that was
I
partaking in like,
don't think that actually docked here. I thought it did, but I think it docked in St. Thomas. But we've had many of the other naval ships docking in Frederickstead. I
okay,
don't think the Iwo Jima did.
okay, because I read an article that it was, I
Oh,
believe
it
it was,
might have been.
but it might have been another ship, but for the sake of just saying a large Navy ship. So the Iwo Jima carries 3,500 sailors. It is legal to dump waste, I believe, 12 miles offshore. So imagine that kind of waste being dumped into the ocean, just food scraps, everything. We know that sharks have followed ships. When people talk to me about like chumming in the water and like, oh, we don't agree with chumming, that ship has literally sailed 2,000 years ago. Sharks have been following ships for ages. In fact, in 2024, there was a shark attack in Montego Bay in Jamaica, and it was a tiger shark that had killed a spear fisherman. Very tragic, but they suspect, and it was very unusual because the waters there are not very healthy. There are not a lot of sharks. They suspect that a cruise ship had just come into town, docked into the bay, and left, and the shark had followed the ship in and then was just kind of hanging out looking for something to eat. So we know that sharks do follow ships for the sake of food, right? There's also sharks have electromagnetic receptors. Their senses. We have five senses. Sharks have seven. So when there's pinging going around, when there are electronics in the water, when there is a military activity like bombing in the water, that is an attractant for species. So could that have something to do with the sharks coming in? It could. It absolutely could. Why not, right? You also have this gigantic ship, and fish love to use those ships as shelter. And then sharks come in, and that's their prey animals, right? So there are a number of reasons why the increased military activity could maybe possibly uptick shark numbers. Would it be a significant uptick? I mean, I highly doubt there's hundreds of sharks rolling into the area because of this military activity in these ships. I think if we're playing a game of detective here, I think maybe there's like a 2% that we can place on the military activity. I would say that the 80% would be on what you mentioned earlier, and that is the uptick of the green sea turtles coming in and staying later in the season.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, and I mean, there's so many different things that we can speculate about, and all the questions that people have, I think, are valid. But
Great.
I think at the end of the day, as we've said, it's situational awareness. I do want to sort of address one last thing before we sign off, because I did ask for people to submit some questions, and this is one of the
Okay.
ones that I got. And it's one that you and I actually chatted about previously. And that was, there is a couple on the island who sort of have become influencers because they like to fish from shore using their why can't I think of the word all of a sudden? I'm so shark focused. They're
Rod and reel?
no.
Drone,
I thank you. The
drone.
drone. Where's my brain? Using
Yeah.
their drone. So they take their drone, they send it up in the air. It has some special outfit on it, and they filmed themselves. I think it was in a prior. I think it was a month before they posted it. But they baited and caught a tiger shark off the beach. It looked to me, based on what I know of St. Croix, it looked like it might have been in the Miss B area. But they sent the drone out so that they could search for a shark. They dropped the bait in front of its nose. It was a tiger shark, not a huge one. They reeled it in onto shore and took pictures. And then in their comments, they said, we're going to go out to Dorsch Beach now and we're going to go catch that tiger, because there was a drone the day after the attack that did show a shark. You looked at it, Dr. Scomo, Grace looked at it. None of us could really identify what kind of shark it was because it was very grainy.
It was very grainy.
Um,
That one did not look like a tiger from the grainy footage that I saw that you sent to me. It's interesting because whenever these incidents happen, there's always people pick up their pitchforks and they want to go out and they want to kill all the sharks. Sharks are highly migratory. So there are probably some resident sharks, tiger sharks. The Caribbean reefs are probably resident to St. Croix. They like to hang out in those areas. They have a reef. They like to hang out there. Tiger sharks, there are certain populations that are going to be in that area permanently. They like it. And there are going to be some that are highly migratory and they roam all over the Caribbean, possibly even outside of the Caribbean. So to go in and eliminate the sharks that are there right now, especially if this is because the uptick of sea turtles, you're just going to have more sharks that are come in. Like it's kind of a fool's errand, right? You're going to go out and you're going to kill a bunch of sharks for no reason. It's not good for the local environment. You do actually want them predating on the sea turtles for the reasons that we mentioned before, that we don't want them eating all the seagrass. We want them kind of move along, turtles, move along, eat some grass over here. It's like herding cattle or goats. As far as the couple, fishing off the beach and catching the tiger sharks, I mean, influencers will be influencers and they're going to do what they think is cool. And unfortunately, a lot of people think that catching sharks and pulling them up and taking photos is cool. It's a lot cooler to be in the water with them and take photos of them there in their natural habitat, I think. I'm not a huge fan, but also if it's not illegal, then what can you do about it?
Well, I will mention though, the fishing part is not illegal, but when they pulled that tiger shark up onto the sand, that was illegal. It's illegal to land a tiger shark.
Okay.
Because of the cartilage in their body will start collapsing under the weight of gravity and crush their organs. So that part was illegal. The fishing part, if protected in the water, it would not have been.
Then that should be handled by the authorities then. But it's unfortunate. There's really not a whole lot of reason to do that. I think people feel really cool when they catch a big shark, but it's kind of like trophy hunting. The good thing is tigers are fairly resilient. When we go out and we tag them, we have to catch them on rod and reel. We bring them in. We kind of do the exact same thing. We bring them up along the boat. We aerate their gills and then we tag them and then we release them. We try to do it like a NASCAR pit crew and do it really quickly. Pulling them up on the beach is crappy because for all the reasons that you stated. And even though tigers are fairly hardy, a lot of them don't make it. Hammerheads oftentimes don't make it. They're very sensitive sharks. People who catch hammerheads and bring them up on shore, take photos, do whatever, they just get so tired from fighting. And a lot of them, like, sharks will go into tonic immobility if they flip on their back. And even when we tag them, oftentimes it is my job to be in the water when we release them and they start to sink and for me to flip them back over and to push them because their gills need to be aerated. So if they're that exhausted from fighting, if they've been flipped upside down and then you just push them back into the water, sometimes they don't make it.
Yeah. I hope that sort of Frankenstein mentality that you were talking about, it dies down. And I am heartened in that when I put this article out, when we've talked about things, I have seen more people be interested and try to dispel the fears and the misconceptions than the opposite. So yeah. I think it's just, like you said, a matter of getting the information out there. Some signage on the beaches would be wonderful. I know that, having grown up on Cape Cod, having family that still lives on the Cape year round, we go out there. I was just there less than a month ago. When the great whites started coming back in, there was a huge public outcry. There was a gentleman who sadly was killed boogie boarding at the beach head of the meadow where I used to swim. My aunt was there earlier that day.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it has changed behavior of the humans on the National Seashore in particular, but they're coming into the bay. But Dr. Scommel and his team have done such an amazing job, the Atlantic White Shark Conservation. They have done such an amazing job with public education. So now a lot of the public in Massachusetts and on the Cape have become advocates for the great whites. And they've changed their behavior. They know, there's this amazing app. I'm obsessed with it. It's called Sharktivity. It's for the white sharks that are tagged, and so you can follow where they are. You can see their migration into Massachusetts. They come in typically towards the end of July, and then they're hanging out. They're up in Nova Scotia, off of Maine, the coast of Maine. So you can follow them, but when initially the chambers of commerce and tourism people, and they were all freaked out, like this is going to destroy the economy of Cape Cod. The sharks are here. People can't get in the water. Instead, it's actually boosted the economy because people want to come see them. So, by they've got spotter planes out on the national seashore during season. They have buoys that ping them so they can tell the lifeguards to get people out of the water. We don't have lifeguards on our beaches here on St. Croix, but we can have signage that, they have that signage on the Cape. So and I'm sure where you are in California on beaches, they've got signage and public information so that people can make more informed choices. So at the end of the day, we can coexist, we can
Yeah,
stay safe, and we can keep the animals that belong in the ocean in our environment safe because they benefit us as well.
absolutely. I think this is a story of coexistence. It really is.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Kinga, I know you have to head out from where you are today, but thank you so much for spending the time with me today. It was fabulous to see your face because normally
You
we're like
too.
texting. And hopefully we have something exciting that we might be announcing in the near future.
Yeah.
Working on. So that's really exciting. So thanks so much for taking the time today, and stay safe. Do you have anything exciting coming up that you can announce? Any new projects or anything right now?
We are in talks for another Shark Week show, which is to be revealed. So there's one coming up for this year. We'll see what else we can get going, but I'm excited about what you and I have cooking.
All right, cool. Well, have a great night. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you have questions, feel free to email me adventure@mystcroix.vi. And, if I can't get them answered, I might be able to send them off to some of the shark scientists or conservationists. And Kinga, what's the email? What's the web address for Shark Allies?
Sharkallies.com.
Okay, sharkallies.com.
Let
Yeah,
me check that and make sure it's not .org. I think it's sharkallies.com.
I feel like it might be .org.
Sharkallies.org. It's .org.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And if you are a shark fan like we are, you can get tons of information there and learn
Yeah.
about conservation efforts. They were integral in getting the shark finning legislation passed in Florida. That was just a couple years ago, I
Yeah.
think, right? Yeah. So
2020.
it's a really amazing organization, and definitely worth lending some support to. So
Yay.
thanks. Have
Thank
a
you so
great night.
much.
Bye.